I first saw Fat, it was in a very early, very rough stage, and literally hours before our programming deadline. But I knew immediately that it was something rare, the singular voice of an individual telling a deeply honest and personal story, but with a grace, dark humor, and compassion that emanated from every frame. I squirmed sometimes, I cried once, I smiled often, but I was always compelled to interact with what was going on screen. Because while Fat is a very specific story, it's also a very universal one, and it speaks to anyone who has ever battled emotions or addictions that they feel powerless in the face of. It's independent filmmaking at its best because it has everything that counts. It's got a good story, compelling performances, and a singular directorial voice. Mark Phinney had to go back to Boston where he lives. He emailed me this morning though because he knew there was a screening this afternoon, and he said for me to tell you that he sincerely hopes you enjoy this film. It's his first, and he's put everything out there for you to see. So we won't be able to have a Q&A, but I hope that you enjoy the film. Thank you.
Hi friends. Okay, so this is my review of Fat. Before I say that, I gotta say this weekend coming up is the last 2 days of the festival. I can't believe it's almost over already. Such a downer because it's so much fun, but you can't see movies every day for life unless you're a film critic and you're getting paid for it, which unfortunately I'm not, so what can you do? Anyway, so this is my review of Fat by director Mark Phinney, who is an American filmmaker. Sort of like a mockumentary style, like very low budget, kind of POV type movie about this fat guy and his miserable life. Starring Mel Rodriguez as Ken. He's the title character. Very, very large man, big stomach, you know, your stereotypical fat guy. When the movie starts, we see him pigging out, cramming his face with like a burger or French fries or whatever. And he does this throughout the movie. He's obviously, you know, a food addict, a binge eater. Even once we see him making himself throw up into a toilet bowl. So I guess he's got also some bulimia thing going on there. And he's obviously in poor health. He's lying in bed with like one of those CPAP machines on, I think they're called, where, you know, people who have sleep apnea have to wear these like masks over their mouth and their nose to help them breathe when they're sleeping, because people can stop breathing, the sleep apnea condition that a lot of fat people have. And okay, so to sum up, did I like this movie? Yeah, I like this movie, but I didn't like his character very much. And it was, you know, one thing I'll say about this movie is it was very honest, brutally honest. And, you know, I had a lot of emotional reaction to it because I'm a fat person. I can relate to a lot of the kind of issues he was having. And so I know a lot of the bullshit that you have to go through when you're a big person. And so I could sympathize with that and I could relate to that. But this guy's character was really kind of a challenge to like, because this guy would just like go on these, like, have these temper tantrums. He would alternate between being this like really kind of jovial, nice to hang out with guy, to just like, you know, freaking out on people and blaming everybody for his problems and just screaming at people and throwing chairs and throwing shit around and just, you know, cramming his face with food like compulsively, and you know, just really not a very likable character in a lot of ways. So okay, where do I want to go with this? Hang on, let me formulate. Okay, sorry about that. I do these reviews off the cuff. I don't like pre-write anything, so I kind of have to rely on what comes out of my mouth when I'm actually doing them, and sometimes my mind just goes blank, as I'm sure you've noticed in my past reviews. So that's what happened to me just there. But I did jot a few notes, and okay, so here's one of the things I didn't like about him, and this is something I've noticed with other fat men. Okay, like this. Okay, so he's got this really nice friend, a really cute guy too. average sized guy. He's like a real, like, real buddy. Like, these guys are best buddies. They hang out at the bar, talk to each other over beer and shit. And he's always telling this guy his problems. I'm so depressed, and I broke up with this girlfriend, but I'm still obsessed with her, blah, 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 this and that. And this guy's always, like, supporting him and saying, yeah, I know you, I'm going to help you through it, don't worry, all this stuff. So his friend of his tells him he's going to set him up with this girl. And he's like, no, you're not. He's like, yeah, I got this really nice girl for you. Her name's Audrey. She's a DJ. So he's like, oh, you got a picture of her? So he's got his phone with him, shows him her Facebook picture, and she's a big girl. And he, like, looks at it, and he's like, oh, no way, dude. Like, there's no way I'm going out with a fat chick. And I'm like, really? Are you fucking serious? And I've noticed this with other fat men, too. I've heard fat men actually make the statement, like, no fat chicks, or I will not date a fat chick. Like, I find them repulsive. And I think one of the lines this guy said in this movie was, fat guys don't want to date fat chicks, and fat chicks don't want to date fat guys. We find each other equally repulsive. And I thought about that. I'm like, you know what? I mean, okay, me personally, let me tell you. I have to admit that I am attracted to thinner men or fit men. I cannot help it. It's just my preference. I like guys with nice bodies. Who doesn't? But I by no means would I ever exclude, or would I not be attracted to, a big man. It's not the size of the guy that matters. It's his personality. It's the way he carries himself. It's his attitude, his approach to life, that kind of thing, the vibe that he gives off. That's what's attractive to me, personally. It's got nothing to do with size, really. I mean, like, look at James Gandolfini, for example. He was a big guy, and he was extremely sexy, extremely hot. And there's others, too. Names escape me at the moment, but believe me, there are others. There are big guys that I've been attracted to. So just to make a blanket statement like that, that's bullshit. Even though there is, like I said, there is some truth to me personally anyway. Yeah, I do like guys with, nice bodies. What can I say? But I don't discriminate. I don't, just automatically, look at some guy and just, like, no, I would never date him. I would never go out with him just because of his size. You have to get to know the person first. And so that's why I could never understand why so many fat guys are so prejudicial against bigger women. My personal theory is that because, they're big guys and they're looked down upon by other men and other people in general, they believe they have to have this hot girlfriend to make themselves look good, to make themselves look like a big man. Metaphorically, not physically. So anyway, that ticked me off, that line, that stereotypical line of his, okay? Although, in the movie, he does end up meeting this girl, Audrey, and getting to know her, and they do start going out, and they have a semi-relationship, which was really sweet, actually. I liked that part of the movie. And I also liked hearing their conversation, because she was a DJ, and this was in Boston. This took place in Boston, because Mark Phinney is from Boston. And so the movie was based there, set there. And so when they meet for their date, they're talking about, like, the Pixies and the Breeders, and I'm like, oh, yeah. So I could get into that conversation. Yeah, and I mentioned the temper tantrums. This guy would go off on these just random, like, just whenever he got, like, whenever the pressure inside him built up too much, he'd just explode and just, like, take it out on everybody around him. And yeah, I can understand that, I mean, when you're fat, you have a lot of anger inside you, and a lot of anger builds up, and sometimes you just want to explode. But I don't really have a lot of respect for people who do that. I guess maybe I'm able to control it more. Not that I'm perfect by any means. But when I see people who just fly off the handle like that, it's a real turnoff. Like, you have to be a little bit more emotionally mature than that. And this guy was anything but emotionally mature. Which brings me to another thing that I am going to comment on. Please don't hate me for saying this. But I really believe that this is a truth that I've noticed about bigger men. In general. I'm not saying all bigger men are like this, but a lot of them are, the ones that I have known personally. And I think a lot of bigger men have mommy issues. They really do. They're overgrown fucking babies. And one of the, this guy, like I said, he'd go off on these temper tantrums, he'd freak out, and then he'd be blubbering like a little fucking baby. And that really, really turns me off, I mean, yeah, I know men can cry, but when they're constantly, like, breaking down and, like, begging you to hold them, and all, like, come on, man, like, grow up, you know? I'm sorry. Okay, that's the third time one of my reviews has been interrupted by the phone. Let's hope I can get through this without it happening again, okay? Sorry. Okay, so he was obsessed with his ex and, like, ultra dependent on her. Like, he'd, you know, sit outside her house, and then one time he just went over there and he's like, how you doing? And she's like, you know, you gotta get over me and stuff. Like, this guy was just a mess. This guy was a fucking mess. And, that's what I didn't like about this movie. Although, you know, like, you know, I have to give it points for being honest, because a lot of people are like this. You know, a lot of fat people have issues, and a lot of thin people have issues. You can't see the issues that thin people have on the surface because they look all right. But once you get to know them, that's when you find out they have issues. But with fat people, it's evident from looking at them. There's obviously some kind of issue going on, right? Usually. Okay, I'm not saying this for everybody. It's got, you know, there's all kinds of factors. But in general, I would say that whenever you see, like, a bigger, like, you know, our weaknesses are evident on the surface, right? But, you know, this guy, like, he went to this support group a couple of times, this Overeaters Anonymous, I think it was, and he would, like, sit in the group, and at first he wouldn't want to talk, but then he, like, really, like, freaked out in one of the meetings because he had, like, a really bad day, and the moderator of the group is trying to talk to him and calm him down and say, listen, you know, we're here for you, and he would just, like, you know, freak out and say, we're all gonna die, this and that, blah, 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 and I'm like, man, oh man, this guy really, really needs to fucking, you know, lighten up and get some help, you know? I will give this movie points, like I said, for its depiction of how difficult life can be for bigger people, about a lot of issues that they have, about a lot of emotional issues that they have. A lot of fat people find it very difficult to deal with life a lot of the time. Thin people too, not just fat people, but this is a movie about fat, so we'll stick to that subject, okay? Life is more difficult for fat people, let's face it. We've got more to deal with. You know, we all have to say, every human being has certain issues that they have to deal with throughout their life. We all have shit that we have to deal with. But when you're fat, you've got extra shit to deal with. You know, you've got, quote, pardon the pun, more on your plate than other people do. And, you know, it's just a reality. So I respected and appreciated this movie for getting that point across. I just did not really like this guy's character very much. You know, towards the end of the movie had kind of an upbeat ending where, you know, he finally, like, makes his bed and gets it all neat and everything. I guess kind of, like, symbolically saying, okay, he's going to clean up his life. He's going to, you know, have a better attitude, a more positive outlook toward life, and not just blame everybody for his problems and kind of mope around and sulk around and constantly lean on other people and expect them to, you know, fix all his problems for him. You know, that's the way this guy was in this movie. So would I say that this movie is good for fat people or bad for fat people? Kind of a mix of both, you know, because it had a lot of stereotypes in it. You know, fat people compulsively cramming their faces with food, just being smelly. That was another thing. There was this one scene in the movie where he's playing pool with his friend, and his friend's like, listen, I want to talk to you about something. Don't get offended, but I want to tell you this because I'm your best friend. I want to help you out. And he's like, what is it? And he goes, well, you know, lately a lot of people have been coming up to me and saying it also, like, you know, you smell. And there you go. There's another stereotype right there. You know, yeah, some fat people do. That it is a fact. I've been, you know, around bigger people who have not been, shall we say, overly hygienic, but, you know, thin people too, not just fat people. So that was, you know, another stereotype there. And the fact he also was diagnosed with diabetes in the course of the movie, another stereotype. If you're fat, you're going to get diabetes. Not necessarily. It's not a given. What else? The sleep apnea, another thing. What else? yeah, you know, the fact that he was just like so dependent on other people, it irritated me about this guy, and the fact that he instantly, you know, the dismissing the, you know, the fat girl right away, like, oh, I'm not going to go out with the fat girl, like, you know, and he's hitting on all these, like, you know, thinner women, and oh, I can get her to date me, blah blah blah, and then he gets all depressed when they reject him, like, you know, seriously. So I guess I would have to give this movie a mixed review. You know, because I could relate to the subject matter, I'll give it a passing grade. I'll give it a thumbs up because it dealt with a lot of the issues that fat people have to deal with, and of course I can sympathize with that, being one myself. But you know, I just wish this character would have been a little bit more of a man. Honest to God, really, this guy was just fucking. I would not be able to deal with this guy. You know, really, seriously, I would not. People like that drive me crazy, you know. People just, you know, the guy was just an overgrown baby. That's all there is to it. So, anyway, I hope that made some kind of sense. I guess I'm getting kind of burned out towards the end of TIFF here, because my mind is all over the place with all these, like, you know, scenes and movies and characters and plots and everything else. But I hope that made sense to you guys. So would I recommend it? If you're a fat person, yes, I would. Or if you love a fat person, if you like fat people, if you have a fat friend, if you have a family member, definitely I would recommend it, sure. But in general, to other people, maybe not so much. You know, it was okay. I think it was this guy's first film, so there you got to make allowances for that as well. So, you know, I'll make allowances for that too. But, you know, it was alright. It could have been better. Could have been more enjoyable. I liked some of the people in his support group. These other fat people in the support group he went to were really nice. And especially there was this one guy. They were a very, very extremely large guy. He had to have been like about 500 pounds. And there was this one really nice scene where the main character in the movie goes into this bar, and this guy is on stage strumming a guitar and singing this beautiful song. He has such a beautiful voice. And I really liked that. That was nice. I like to see that. But, you know... Oh, and there's a lot of good music in this movie, too. A lot of, like, indie rock music. I stayed for the end of the credits to see if I recognized any of the band names, and I didn't. So they were probably all, like, local Boston bands, but good soundtrack to this movie. Like, really a lot of indie rock in it. And the music really fit the story. So, yeah. What else? I think that's it. I think that is it. So, yeah, interesting film. Could have been better, but, you know, dealt with a lot of it, dealt with important subject matter. Definitely, you know, I'm glad to see movies made about fat. There needs to be movies made about fat, so I do appreciate that, you know. They're far and few between, and there needs to be more movies dealing with that subject. So, okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, final weekend, I'm seeing 2 tomorrow on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. My 2 final movies on Sunday. My final movie I'm really looking forward to is Oculus. It's a Midnight Madness, and I am super, super duper looking forward to that. But so far, my favorite movie, The Festival, is Under the Skin. I have not been able to stop thinking about that movie since I saw it. The one with Scarlett Johansson, the alien girl who lures all the men. I fucking love that. That's probably going to be my favorite. Although I have to see how Oculus turns out, because that could be a real contender. But so far, that is my fave of The Festival. I'll probably end up doing a video at the end talking about best and worst. Well, you know what the worst is, right? Okay, so I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching, you guys. Bye.